Coming up, the San Carlos Apache Tribe is in a battle to save what the chairman says is the heart of the tribe's cultural and spiritual beliefs. We'll get the latest from Terry Rambler. Plus, the U.S. government is on the brink of a shutdown, not due to the pandemic, but due to a stalemate in Congress. John Tahsuda will give us the latest on how this will impact tribes and workers. I'm Patty Tawahungva. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian country today.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. Working with award-winning professors, Cronkite students learn news reporting, social media, shooting and editing videos, and producing content for communications industries. Cronkite's 15 professional programs give students the opportunity to cover critical issues throughout the U.S. and beyond. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tawahungva. After years of hard work, the Spirit Lake Nation in North Dakota is getting new border signs. The nation's territory includes a large part of Devil's Lake, which began expanding during a wet cycle in the 1990s. This is a natural phenomenon that has created thousands of acres of prairie fisheries there. During this time, state transportation officials moved signs that were being swallowed up by the lake. Now, after years of hard work by tribal citizens, signs marking the nation's boundaries and major ports of entry into tribal lands are being restored. Spirit Lake Council Chairman Douglas Yankton says this is a good lesson for younger citizens to understand the importance of knowing and defending treaty rights.
I just wanted to make the next generations, I would say, more so aware of our treaties, our constitutions, our law and order codes.
Now that the boundary lines have been remapped, Yankton says the nation will meet with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to talk about its northern boundary. And in Washington, the Makah tribe is one step closer to winning back one of its treaty rights from 1855. A judge is recommending the nation be allowed to resume its traditional gray whale hunt after a legal battle with environmental groups that has gone on for decades. Before its last hunt in 1999, the tribe had not exercised its treaty rights to hunt whales for decades because the whale's population was declining. Makah Tribal Council Vice Chairman Patrick DePoe was 16 when he celebrated the last whale's arrival on the beaches of Neah Bay. DePoe says the hunt is a sacred tradition that is part of every citizen's story.
I think about people we've lost over the years. They never had this opportunity but wanted it. I think about people that were always prepared, always ready, and following this process step for step, hoping to have that chance.
While this is a big victory for the tribe, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has the final say on whether the gray whale hunt will be continued in the future. 3 weeks of public hearings are expected to begin this week in Seattle. A virtual meeting Thursday will decide whether a California state park will be restored to its original name. Patrick's Point State Park, known originally by the Yurok people as Sumeg, is located in Northern California along the coast. Advocates are telling decision makers they want the place's original name restored.
The name change is asserting that we have always been here, we are going to remain here, and we're going to tell our story now, and we're not going to be overwritten or overshadowed by oftentimes oppressive names or ideas.
Sumeg was the place of a historic Yurok trading village. On Thursday, the California State Park and Recreation Commission will vote whether or not to rename the park. It's currently named after Patrick Began, a homesteader who was accused of murdering many Native people in the mid-1800s. If the name is changed, it will be the first time a California state park is renamed. Fossilized footprints found in New Mexico show that indigenous populations lived in the area as early as 23,000 years ago. The footprints were found in the White Sands National Park and debunk the Clovis theory that has said indigenous people arrived in the Americas within the last 16,000 years. The study was published in the journal Science. Based on the size of the footprints, researchers believe that at least some were made by children and teenagers who lived during the last ice age. The White Sands study provides a solid baseline for when humans definitely were in North America. And Cree Métis archaeologist Paulette Steeves says her research on indigenous life and culture extends far beyond the 23,000-year mark. Though indigenous people were not included in the study, on social media, tribal people reacted and noted that Western science is just now catching up with what tribal stories have always taught. And those are the headlines for Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Tholahungva. Coming up, in 2015, language was inserted into the National Defense Authorization Act that requires the U.S. Forest Service to turn over sacred Apache land to a mining company. We'll hear from the tribal chairman about their fight to save Oak Flat.
Plus, the deadline is looming to avoid a government shutdown. Thousands of government workers could be looking at furloughs if Congress doesn't act. We'll get the latest from John Tahsuda. That's later in our newscast. In the Tonto National Forest in southeastern Arizona, there's a parcel of land called Oak Flat. It's sacred to the San Carlos Apache people, who call it Chichil Bilda Gotil. It's actually on the National Register of Historic Places as a traditional cultural property. Still, because language was inserted into the National Defense Authorization Act in 2015, the U.S. Forest Service is slated to turn over the land to a mining company, Resolution Copper. Terry Rambler is chairman of the San Carlos Apache Tribe, and he joins us today to give us the latest in this fight to save a sacred site. Welcome, Chairman Rambler.
Thank you. Good morning.
So let's start with kind of the big picture, and that is maybe outline kind of the case that's happened so far, and then we can get into the developments.
Okay, well, first of all, this is our tribe and other tribes' religious and cultural cultural foundation is at stake here. And right now, what's happening in Congress, it's really important, and everybody needs to understand this, is that the Oak Flat area, which in Apache is Chichil Bistagotel, and right now, through the House of Representatives, they have, through the committee, they have inserted into the budget reconciliation package that's being proposed right now in Congress. It's going to go up for a vote in the full House soon, and after that, we'll go to the Senate. And so we encourage all tribes across the United States to support each other on this issue and reach out to your congressional delegation and encourage them to support the Save Oak Flat Act in the House of Representatives that's being sponsored by Representative Raul Grijalva, and also when it gets to the Senate, sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders.
One of the problems that you face, Chairman, is over the years, the Defense Authorization Act was used, and it was a midnight action without public hearings or any other sort of discourse. Do you fear that happening again in this case?
I hope not, but you never know. And just recently, some of our allies in Congress tried to insert the same Save Oak Flat Act into the National Defense Authorization Act, but it was not considered. It was not considered at all, and it's ironic that now they're going through the process of screening and everything, evaluating, but they never did that when former Senators McCain and Flake just ran this through at midnight when we were all asleep.
One of the problems with fingerprint legislation is that there's no fingerprints on it. Do you think there are members who are saying one thing but doing others behind the scenes?
Yes, last week, Monday, I believe it was on, trying to look at my notes, September 20th, I had a phone conversation with Congressman Tom O'Halloran of Arizona. He represents our district, District 1. And we had a lengthy conversation, and I asked him point blank, Congressman, one thing I need to know today is where do you stand on the Save Oak Flat issue? Tell me one way or another, I need to know. So he told me that he stands with the tribes, and that means in Arizona, 18 of the 22 tribes right now support the Save Oak Flat through resolution. I'm still reaching out to the other 4. But when he says something like that, he knows because we've been sending him the resolutions. So the majority of tribes in Arizona support the Save Oak Flat Act. So that means that he's supporting the Save Oak Flat. But I understand from sources in Washington, D.C., that he's saying one thing to us, but over there, he's working behind the scenes to prevent the Save Oak Flat Act on being a part of the budget reconciliation bill. And so I encourage my Congressman, Tom O'Halloran, to come out publicly and say that he supports the Save Oak Flat Act.
Let me help the viewers. Tell us what it really will mean if this mine is developed to Apache people.
Well, first, it's only 14 miles west of our reservation boundary. And it's a really spiritual area. Our people have used that area since we were placed here on Earth. And it affects 10 tribes that have ties to the area. The Tonto National Forest, which was funded by Resolution Copper, did a ethnographic historical study on the area, and that's the one most area where Apache footprints are. And we use that area to this day to have healing ceremonies and prayers for the sick, and also the coming of age ceremony for our young woman that's been a part of our culture forever. And it's going to impact all that. Right now, the Apaches, that's probably our most sacred site. Unlike other faith, we use the environment to connect to our Creator God. The natural elements, the sacred spring, the medicinal plants, and everything that's in that environment, we use that for our connection to our Creator God. So, it affects us. It affects our faith, our hope, everything about who we are. It's at stake here.
Has this been something that's brought young people into the area of politics? I know you started young on this issue, but has this brought people around to think about things differently?
Yes, like in all things, it's an educational issue right now. Like all other tribes, also in the United States, we have a challenge of retaining our Apache language, and that comes with knowing about who we are, our identity. So that's still a challenge. But with this issue, we've had a lot of youth involved. There's a local organization called the Apache Stronghold Organization, which has really taken a big lead on this issue for all people, not only the Apaches, but all tribes in the United States.
I know the tribe has looked at a lot of the economics involving the mine, including its size, but one thing that struck me from the research that you've all done is how little economic impact it will have in this country. It really is about what's going on in the rest of the world, not here.
Yes, when I first got involved in this fight back in 2004, the Resolution Copper was saying 8,000 jobs, and over the years it's dwindled down to about 3,000 or 2,000 jobs. And we did our own economic impact analysis, and we're saying directly in that area, it's only going to have around 300 jobs impact, because mining today is automation. So a lot of this job will be done through automation from Utah, and also people that come into the area, they'll be driving into the area that reside like 50, 100 miles from Superior, where this mine is, and near Superior, where the Oak Flat is near there. So the economic impact is not as much as what people are saying. And also most of this, all the copper is being projected to be shipped overseas to China.
Representative Rahalva is a committee chairman, and so he has kind of extra influence. How far do you think he's willing to take this issue? Have you talked to him about this?
Yes, he's there with the tribes. Representative Grijalva does not represent us in our district, O'Halloran does, but he's there for Arizona, and that's what I respect about him. And he understands our issues as far as the retaining our identity and maintaining our faith, and that should not be other people of faith have a right to that. It seems like they just trample over our rights.
Who are some of the other key players that people should be reaching out to?
I ask everyone to reach out to Senators Kelly and also Sinema in Arizona, because they're going to be very critical when it comes to the budget reconciliation process. I have hope that this budget reconciliation process will go through the House with the Save Oak Flat Act intact. But when it gets to the Senate side, it's going to get a little bit more trickier. But through the budget reconciliation process, we only need all 50 Democrats to support it in order to get through. That's why Senators Sinema and Kelly are so important. I encourage all the Arizona tribes to reach out to them, and all of the United States to reach out to Kelly and Sinema and help us on this issue.
Have you had initial conversations with them?
Yes, I haven't had a chance to talk to Sinema, but with Kelly, I've had the opportunity to talk to him, and I'll be talking to him again. But so far, he has not publicly come out to support the Save Oak Flat Act.
I know that this site is also on the National Cultural and Historic Preservation sites. What does it mean for people who are not Indigenous to preserve this site?
Well, let's just say you're a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints up in Utah, and they have their temple there. And somebody finds copper under there, and they want to extract that copper under there. Just think all the fuss that will be created from there, and because it has to do with their faith. But over here, Apaches and all the 9 other tribes that are connected to this area, when we're trying to do the same thing, and that level of respect is not the same. And it goes back to our history with the United States, or their approach to us of trying to be dominant over us and trying to think that we're their children, and they know what's best for us. Our history is just, it lays with lies and cheating and relocation and trampling our freedom of religion. It's just all scattered all over the place, our history with that over 500 years. Here's an opportunity for the United States Congress to correct some of that, not all of it, but correct some of that, because it applies over here only in Arizona, but it affects all tribes across the United States. Here's an opportunity to correct that, to do some sort of justice for everything that they have done to us.
Chairman Terry Rambler, thank you so much.
Thank you.
When we come back, if the government shuts down this week, how will you be affected? John Tahsuda joins us next to talk about Congress and the budget. There are new numbers from the census, and there are significant impacts to Indian country. Plus, tribes are waiting to see if the government will shut down this week. We have a lot to discuss with John Tahsuda III. He's a regular contributor to Indian Country Today. John was the staff director for the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, and he is also a former principal deputy assistant secretary for Indian Affairs. Today, he is a partner with Navigators Global, which is a company that provides political services to several industries, including tribes. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Mark. It's always great to visit with you.
Let's start with the census numbers. On one hand, the top line is huge, but on reservation level, it's not so.
Right. It seems like we never really budge that number, do we?
No, exactly. What are kind of the lessons for this that we can take away from the census?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. It is interesting, despite a lot of effort in the last 2 census, that to try to get more people registered or in the database on reservations and around the reservation communities, but it doesn't seem to go up much. And maybe that's an indication that we're still losing people off the reservation, the brain drain, and that would be unfortunate. But one of the things that's really critical, as you know, from the census are a lot of programmatic and funding issues that the government uses based on those numbers. And one thing that I tried to do, and I think it's going to take a concerted effort for a number of years, but to get the census folks and the Department of Commerce folks to really focus on tribal jurisdictional areas as opposed to strictly on the reservation, because we know there's so many tribal folks who live off the reservation, but they're nearby, they receive their services from the tribe, et cetera. But they're often not accurately captured in those numbers. And so that's something that we started to work on a few years ago, and it really needs to be pushed forward so that the tribal community itself really is able to be captured in those numbers.
I've always wondered if there's a pilot project possible where the census could work with a tribe and, of course, sign confidentiality and data protection, but actually measure the census against enrollment.
That would be an interesting, maybe a pilot project would work. As you often find, the census folks have their own formula, they have their own process, and it can be a challenge to get them to think outside the box. But yeah, a pilot project would be something great. It might take some congressional direction to push them that way, but that would be one way to go about it that might yield better results.
There are two huge issues in Washington this week that I want to ask you about. One is the potential for not funding the government on October 1st, which happens from time to time. And the second is the debt service. And this is always one of those paradoxes where no matter which party's in power, they blame the other party for running the debt up.
Right. Each party wants to blame the other for running the debt up for their priorities, but not that party's priorities. We're really good at that.
Exactly. And the other paradox with the debt is that the money's already spent, so they're arguing about something that's already happened.
Right. Well, as with many things, that it becomes a negotiating point, for whatever the objectives are for either party. So.
Congress has removed some of the federal Indian programs from the calculation from the government shutdown. Is there enough of a protection in place, or is it still going to be a pretty big impact if it does shut down?
Well, it will still be a pretty big impact. We are able to provide forward funding for let's say the BIE schools, and so the kids will not be as impacted. Usually, these things are relatively short term. They have a lot of impacts, and even going a few weeks obviously is can be harmful to folks. But the forward funding provides them a full year of funding, so that they have that there, and the kids don't have to miss out on school and all the things that go with it, school lunches, et cetera. So that the real impact for the BIA happens at the social services level often. The people and some of our worst hit tribal communities are the ones that need those the most. And so that's a really potential big impact on the social service side. And those programs are the ones that get shut down.
Well, and also on the cash flow side for tribes that are trying to manage multi-million-dollar contracts, to have that flow cut off is also an impact.
It will depend, that aspect of it can depend upon when the tribe signs their compact or their 638 contract. Those are funded pretty quickly, and they are funded largely full year. So if a tribe has theirs, and there are several tranches that they encourage tribes to get those in, or several dates, so they can have tranches that go out. And so if folks have gotten them in place now, and that funding can go out, then they do it. And so if the shutdown happens right now, oftentimes these shutdowns happen after there's been a couple of continuing resolutions. So it's later in the year, and the tribes with compacts and contracts get their round of funding for those programs before that hits. If it hits right now, it could be really devastating because virtually none of the tribes have received those funds yet. And so we're hopeful. I would say, watching the news, it looks like there's a good chance that there will be a short-term continuing resolution that will move things forward, and the actual shutdown, if it happens, will be later in the year.
The debt service issue surfaces from time to time, or not debt service, but debt limit. The United States has never not met that, and there's now pressure with the Senate being so closely divided. What kind of the prospects for that?
I suspect that they will reach a deal and find a way to do that later in the year. Usually it takes a little bit of hurt. So usually what happens, the federal government starts placing priorities on what obligations it's going to continue to meet and those that it's going to let slide. And so the ones that it lets slide are often payments to, could be payments to veterans or Medicare. And those are painful to important voting blocks for different parts of Congress. And so when that immediate pain is felt, there's often a response. So, there'll be a deal in the debt limit. It's just a question of, how long they let it slide, if they let it slide.
John Tahsuda, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. Always great to visit with you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, go to IndianCountryToday.com. I'm Mark Trahant.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. Standing rock. This is Indian Country Today.